Hello there, curious mind. Welcome to a journey into one of humanity's most enchanting and unsettling questions. Are we truly alone in the universe, or has our history been silently intertwined with forces far older, far more advanced, and far stranger than ourselves? From the dawn of civilization, gazing at the night sky has been both a comfort and a mystery. Every spark of starlight seemed alive, whispering secrets across the endless black of space. Ancient peoples watched the heavens not only for navigation but for meaning, wondering if the beings who might inhabit those invisible worlds were watching back. Even now, millennia later, when science has expanded our vision and technology has amplified our reach into deep space, the question remains hauntingly unresolved. The possibility that civilizations beyond Earth may have existed or may still exist, waiting out there, hangs over us like a veil between fear and wonder. But here lies the twist: what if these civilizations have already touched us, walked among us, and left fingerprints scattered across the timeline of our species? This is where the allure of extraterrestrial hypotheses emerges, hovering between science and myth, between evidence and imagination. It is not merely the curiosity of whether distant planets harbor life. Instead, it is a far more provocative suggestion that we, as humans, might not be the sole architects of our story. These ideas grip attention because they challenge the very foundations of how we understand our past. They make us ask, were some of our greatest accomplishments aided or even initiated by other intelligence not of this earth? The opening chapter of this exploration requires us to stand at the gateway of history, philosophy, and speculative science. We are not here to confirm or deny, we are here to step fearlessly into the liminal space of possibilities. The ancient pyramids glowing under the desert sun, the colossal stone faces on remote Pacific islands, or the mysterious lines etched into the Peruvian desert floor, these are not just monuments. To the believers in alien intervention, they are proof, breadcrumbs left by cosmic visitors who shaped early human destiny. Even skeptics find themselves pausing, compelled to admit, these mysteries are difficult to dismiss with absolute certainty. And so, the opening of this inquiry is not about answers but about sparks, the sparks of imagination, curiosity, and yes, sometimes unease. Because when we claim the stars as silent, we reveal more about our fear of isolation than about cosmic truth. Yet when we imagine them as inhabited, as having once sown their presence into our lives, we open a far more captivating and unnerving possibility, that we are part of a galactic narrative we do not yet comprehend. This introduction is not meant to soothe, it is meant to ignite. The question of extraterrestrial civilizations is not dry speculation, it is a flame that licks at both science and myth, demanding attention. To believe that we are alone makes humanity fragile, a solitary candle against infinite night. To believe we are not alone makes humanity humble, one part of an unfathomable choir of voices rising from worlds far across the cosmos. Both views stretch the imagination to breaking, and both, in their extremes, remind us why this subject never ceases to enchant. So here is the invitation: lean closer, let the ordinary fade, and prepare to follow a path that winds between archaeology and astronomy, between the soil of ancient Earth and the silence of deep space. Our journey begins with a single premise, that perhaps, just perhaps, extraterrestrial civilizations have existed and that their footsteps, faint but persistent, may already echo through the corridors of human history. When we attempt to understand the origins of the idea that extraterrestrial civilizations may have existed or may even have touched the story of human beings, we cannot begin in the modern age with telescopes, radio antennas, and spacecraft. We must begin far earlier, with humanity's oldest instincts and oldest stories, for the desire to populate the sky with presences greater than ourselves is as ancient as our species. From the first nights when small groups of people gathered around flames and looked upward into the vault of stars, the imagination carried them outward. They saw not a cold void but a canopy alive with potential. The stars were not meaningless points of light, they were dwellings, symbols, eyes, or fires lit by other intelligences. Whether taken as gods, spirits, ancestors, or mysterious strangers, the concept that there might be others beyond Earth became a universal feature of human culture. And from these myths, philosophies, and religions arise the roots of all later hypotheses of extraterrestrial visitation or influence. To stand in Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, is to find one of the earliest examples. Sumerian civilization left behind clay tablets recounting stories of the Anunnaki, beings who were said to have arrived from the heavens and given laws, technologies, and authority to the earliest human kings. Unlike vague abstractions, these Anunnaki were personalized and active. To people at the dawn of history, such beings legitimized authority and explained knowledge seemingly beyond the grasp of simple societies. To interpreters millennia later, their narratives look suspiciously like descriptions of contact. Could these tales be memories of encounters with beings from the stars, mythologized in the language of deity because the concept of extraterrestrial did not exist? Whether or not one believes this, the pattern is remarkable. The heavens were never imagined as empty, and the origin of power and wisdom was consistently assigned to those who came down from above. In Egypt, this same motif reappeared, though expressed differently. For Egyptians, the afterlife was not a vague elsewhere but a journey into the stars. Pharaohs were considered of divine birthright, their souls ascending after death to join the cosmos itself. The pyramids, with their meticulous alignment to Orion's belt and other constellations, embodied this connection between earth and sky. They were both monuments and gateways, structures through which the mortal ruler consorted with the cosmic order. Some have argued that the scale and precision of these structures required outside help. Others insist this underestimates the sophistication of ancient Egyptians themselves. But either way, the fact remains that Egypt's entire cosmology revolved around contact with the skies. To them, heaven and earth were woven together, and humans were directly influenced by forces beyond this world. Any hypothesis of alien influence can only gain traction because the Egyptians themselves already insisted the heavens were filled with powers shaping human destiny. Far across the Sahara, long centuries later, anthropologists studying the traditions of the Dogon tribe in Mali were stunned to find references to Sirius not as one visible star but as a system. The Dogon spoke of Po Tolo, an invisible companion star heavier than anything else. This struck Western science as strange, because Sirius B, a white dwarf companion invisible to human eyes, had only been confirmed with telescopes in the 19th century. How could such knowledge exist in tribal memory long before telescopes existed? Some claim coincidence or cultural contamination. Others see hints of ancient knowledge passed down from forgotten contact. Regardless of the cause, the Dogon testimony becomes one more link in the long tradition of human fascination with neighbors in the sky, neighbors whose nature or existence could not be quantified with human tools but was insisted upon nonetheless. Meanwhile, in Greece, the philosophical imagination began to probe the same questions. Greek myth overflowed with gods descending from Olympus, interfering with human affairs, offering guidance or destruction. But philosophers began to strip these visions of divine drama and consider the cosmos rationally. Anaxagoras suggested that heavenly bodies were material objects and that seeds of life might spread throughout the universe. Epicurus, bolder still, declared that innumerable worlds exist, some like ours and others utterly different, many inhabited by living beings. Here we find not only myth but reason aligned with the alien idea. The instinct was so persistent that it survived even in cultures steeped in strict theology and cosmological boundaries. Even when religious orthodoxy attempted to shut down the possibility of others arguing that God had made Earth unique, philosophy and imagination stubbornly pressed outward, unable to believe a sky so vast could house only silence. Religious traditions contributed their own material. In the Hebrew texts, the prophet Ezekiel describes visions of chariots of fire, wheels within wheels gleaming with light, descending from the heavens accompanied by radiant beings whose forms glowed like molten metal. To believers of the time, these were encounters with divine messengers, expressions of God's overwhelming power. To modern interpreters influenced by the imagery of rocket engines and spacecraft, the resemblance to flying craft is uncanny. Could an ancient prophet, witnessing technology beyond comprehension, have described it with the vocabulary of the miraculous? The question is unsettling, because it insists upon the possibility that religious visions encode misunderstood encounters with higher intelligences. In the Indian subcontinent, the great epics offer even more elaborate possibilities. The Mahabharata and Ramayana recount vivid stories of Vimanas, flying chariots powered by divine energies, capable of traversing skies and even moving between planetary domains. They are described in detail, dazzling vehicles maneuvering in aerial battles, firing weapons whose destructive might echoes the modern concept of nuclear arms. Entire cities are said to have been leveled by weapons launched from these skyborne crafts. To followers of Hindu tradition, these are allegories, symbols, divine miracles. To those captivated by extraterrestrial hypotheses, the Vimanas are ancient records of technological contact, proof that the memory of advanced machinery filtered into ancient epic poetry. Even if interpreted metaphorically, the linguistic and narrative richness remains peculiar. Flying machines and unimaginable weapons are not simply inventions of the modern imagination, they already haunted our mythic archives thousands of years ago. Elsewhere, on the plains of Nazca in Peru, immense geoglyphs stretch across the earth, visible only from far above. Enormous lines and figures shaped like birds and animals can be discerned when viewed from the sky, though from the ground they are almost meaningless. Conventional explanations cite ritual pathways of ancient cultures. Yet some propose these lines resemble landing strips or messages directed upward, perhaps toward unseen recipients passing over the plains. Whether this was their intent or not, they illustrate once again humankind's preoccupation with communication to and from the heavens. From the Americas come countless tales of sky beings. Among Native American tribes, legends speak of the star people visitors from the heavens who taught wisdom, sometimes intermarried with local tribes, and returned to the stars afterward. Among the Maya, calendars of immense precision charted planetary cycles with uncanny accuracy, leading some to speculate that their astronomical skill was guided by outside knowledge. In Japan, stories of the Tengu tell of mysterious sky creatures with advanced powers. Polynesian tales carry images of luminous canoes sailing down from the skies, bringing teachers and rulers. The repetition is astonishing. Continent to continent, isolated in geography and language, humanity repeats variations of the same archetype, beings arriving from above, bearing knowledge, punishment, or salvation. Skeptics argue that such repetition is inevitable. Human psychology tends toward projection. The sky is vast and frightening, and myths project potency there. Gods, ancestors, and imaginal beings appear above because above is mysterious. But even if one takes this cautious view, the effect is profound. It establishes that the human mind, across cultures, has always insisted the heavens are inhabited. Whether those inhabitants are divine or extraterrestrial is a matter of framing, but the insistence never fades. To those who embrace extraterrestrial hypotheses, however, the evidence looks cumulative. How is it that cultures with no contact developed such strikingly similar themes? How did they encode astronomical knowledge such as the Sirius system? How did texts describe flying machines long before machines existed? The argument gained power especially in the 20th century, when modern technology offered parallels to ancient depictions. What had once seemed like allegory suddenly looked like rudimentary eyewitness accounts: fire-spewing vehicles, destructive sky weapons, beings descending from stars. In mythic language, they may have preserved what science fiction language later called spacecraft, lasers, and nuclear blasts. If even one of these traditions masks a memory of true encounter, the implications ripple outward into every thought of human identity. It would mean human civilization was not entirely self-generated but co-authored, nudged, or at least observed by minds from elsewhere. The story of humanity would be folded into a larger cosmic drama, not isolated to Earth. Even if none of these myths are actual memories, their existence reveals something almost equally important: the idea of alien contact is archetypal, universal, embedded in the architecture of humanity's imagination. It is perhaps inevitable that when given the chance, we revived those possibilities in modern times through science fiction, speculation, and scientific search. Thus the origins of the alien idea are no accident and no shallow invention. They are the oldest layer of human storytelling. They emerge from Sumer, from Egypt, from Africa, from Greece, from India, from the Americas and Oceania. They shimmer in text, in stone, in song, and in dance. Whether we read them as literal memories of intervention or as imaginative projections of meaning, they demonstrate without doubt that human beings are incapable of seeing the cosmos as silent. The universe is, and always has been, populated in our imagination. And whether that imagination reflected real contact or simply an urgent desire not to be alone, it planted seeds that still grow today. For when we today look outward with radio telescopes or imagine civilizations evolving around distant suns, we are not charting new territory. We are continuing an ancient habit, reviving over and over the conviction that we are not alone. And perhaps one day, when we finally encounter definitive evidence of life beyond Earth, we will realize that our ancestors had already been preparing us. They looked to the sky and saw neighbors, gods, strangers, teachers. We look to the same sky, armed with science, and see the same. Their voices and ours overlap, thousands of years apart, whispering the same question across time: who else is out there, and how long have they been with us? The ancient astronaut hypothesis occupies a peculiar place within both scientific curiosity and human imagination. It is not a modern invention alone, it has deep roots in countless myths and legends, yet it gained its name only in the 20th century, when writers began to connect humanity's most mysterious monuments and inexplicable advances with the possibility of guidance or intervention from elsewhere. The essence of the hypothesis is simple yet bold, that extraterrestrials may have visited Earth in antiquity, engaging with human beings in ways that left enduring traces: architectural, cultural, technological within our societies. Proponents do not argue merely that alien life exists, but that it may have bent the course of human history. Critics often dismiss it as pseudoscience or projection, pointing to underestimation of ancient ingenuity. But to deny the fascination is impossible. Even for skeptics, the hypothesis speaks to basic questions: why are there structures that defy easy explanation? And why do so many traditions around the world insist upon visitors descending from the skies? When one thinks of this hypothesis, the pyramids of Egypt inevitably come to mind. These extraordinary architectural marvels still command awe. Rising from the desert, aligned with astonishing precision, they remain among the most iconic symbols of ancient civilization. Conventional Egyptology explains them as funerary tombs, products of immense human labor, guided by centuries of gradual architectural evolution. Yet alternative voices argue that the size, accuracy, and symbolic alignment exceed what should have been achievable with primitive tools and brute force alone. The Great Pyramid of Giza, with its 2.3 million stone blocks, some weighing more than 70 tons, fits within tolerances so tight that modern engineers struggle to imagine replicating such exactitude with the means available 4,500 years ago. The internal chambers are oriented with subtle astronomical significance. The whole structure seems less like a tomb and more like a coded message from an intelligence obsessed with both Earth and stars. Within the framework of the ancient astronaut hypothesis, this is no coincidence. The Great Pyramid, rather than solely a human effort, might have been guided by beings who understood geometry and technology far beyond the scope of nihil laboris. The structure then becomes not merely a national monument but a collaboration between humans and star visitors. If Egypt dazzles with its endurance, the mystery only deepens when we cross the ocean to South America, where pre-Columbian cultures crafted stone monuments and earthworks that leave archaeologists and architects alike puzzled. On the high plateau of Peru lies Sacsayhuaman, a cyclopean fortress built from stone so massive some weigh more than 100 tons. These boulders were quarried miles away and transported over rugged Andean terrain, set into walls with interlocking precision so seamless that modern observers marvel at the impossibility of inserting even a razor blade between them. The official explanation cites genius in stone cutting, cooperative labor, and sheer determination. The alternative interpretation is that Golden Age visitors of enormous knowledge aided the Inca or their predecessors. The stones are so massive, so perfectly arranged, that the suggestion of advanced technology, levitation, anti-gravity fields, or machines capable of moving impossible weight fascinates those willing to see echoes of intervention. Travel further into the Peruvian desert and one confronts the gigantic Nazca lines, immense geoglyphs carved into the dry earth, their white etchings stretching for miles across the desert floor. They depict animals, humanoid figures, spirals, and geometric patterns on a grand scale. From ground level, they make little sense. One sees only lines scored through the landscape. From above, however, they become patterns of breathtaking detail. Since an aerial vantage was unknown to the Nazca culture, this triggers endless speculation. Were these design signals intended for sky watchers? Were they runways for visiting craft? Or were they ritual pathways walked by participants to invoke deities? Mainstream scholars lean toward rituals related to water and fertility. Yet their scale, visibility only from above, and their persistence across centuries become irresistible evidence, for proponents of the ancient astronaut theory, of attempts to communicate with visitors circling in the sky. The same enigma repeats across the Pacific at Easter Island. Rapa Nui's monumental moai statues stand like silent sentinels, staring out toward the sea. Some weigh more than 70 tons, carved and transported across rugged volcanic terrain by small island populations. While archaeologists propose ingenious methods involving wooden sleds, ropes, and cooperative manpower, others argue that such a feat far exceeded what should have been possible for a dwindling and isolated community. To proponents of the ancient astronaut theory, these giants are not merely guardians of ancestors but possibly representations of visitors from above, stylized faces of beings remembered in stone, honored through immense labor. Who were these figures meant to greet, and why are they oriented as though forever watching? The explanation may simply be cultural artistry, but the uncanny scale continues to attract alien-themed speculation. In Central America, the Maya present further intrigue. Their civilization mastered astronomy to an impressive degree, calculating the cycles of Venus, the Moon, and solar eclipses with accuracy unmatched until modern times. Their calendar cycles stretch across thousands of years with eerie precision. Yet according to mainstream accounts, the Maya lacked wheels for transport and metal tools, making the technological disparity bewildering. According to enthusiasts of the ancient astronaut hypothesis, such knowledge suggests input from more advanced entities, who either taught the Maya astronomy or directly provided complex observational instruments that vanished with time. Their elaborate temples and pyramids rise in perfect astronomical alignment, as if they were not merely ceremonial centers but observatories designed with knowledge humans should not have had. The central figure at Palenque, depicted on a carved sarcophagus lid, appears by some interpretations to show a man crouched in a seated capsule, surrounded by what could be interpreted as tubes, flames, and mechanical structures. Orthodox archaeologists interpret this as stylized religious symbolism of the world tree and the underworld. But to those of more speculative imagination, it eerily resembles an astronaut piloting a spacecraft. Crossing to Mesopotamia, one cannot escape the profound influence of Sumerian myth. In the clay tablets of the Enuma Elish and other ancient tales, the Anunnaki were gods who descended from the heavens to shape humankind. One could take them literally as deities, or as early memories of beings that descended in actual craft, imposing laws, ordering civilizations, and leaving behind monumental structures to testify to their presence. The Sumerians themselves associated wisdom with descent, with the heavens as the source. The theory suggests that human civilization may have emerged not spontaneously but under the influence or inspiration of external powers, who either genetically altered existing hominids or instructed civilizations directly. For believers, the myths are historical records written in symbolic form, misunderstood by archaeologists who see only allegory. These arguments, while captivating, are often dismissed by academia as underestimation of ancient ingenuity, a failure to recognize that determination, experimentation, and centuries of effort can achieve wonders without alien assistance. Mainstream scholars point out that we consistently project our present into the past. When people in the 20th century saw jets and rockets, they reinterpreted Ezekiel's chariot as a spacecraft. When engineers marvel at the stones of Sacsayhuaman, they fail to appreciate the possibility that sheer labor and techniques perhaps lost to time could have achieved the same. Similarly, the precision of pyramids may reflect a level of skill we frequently underestimate, not alien calculators and laser guides. Yet the tension remains unresolved. Those who emphasize conventional explanations often find themselves unable to fully satisfy the sheer strangeness, while those who embrace the alien narrative often discard the resilience of human innovation. What makes the ancient astronaut hypothesis enduring is not only the monuments but the universality of the stories. From continent to continent, one finds depictions of beings descending from the skies, offering knowledge, interfering in wars, or mating with mortals. Oral traditions among native tribes of North America speak of the star people who came down to teach and occasionally took brides from among the tribes. In Polynesia, stories of celestial canoes glimmer in the record. In Africa, gods descend with fire and thunder. These are not isolated anomalies, they form a pattern that human collective memory has carried across continents and epochs. Whether one interprets these as archetypal expressions of the same psychological impulse or the traces of genuine contact, the result is the same, the pattern is inescapable. If such interventions were true, the implications are staggering. Humanity would be the witness to, or co-creator with, civilizations far older and wiser, whose tools surpassed our understanding. Our religions may be misremembered encounters. Our monuments may be collaborations. Our leap into civilization may be less an accidental convergence of human factors and more a guided event. This possibility unsettles many because it reduces human uniqueness, suggesting we did not rise entirely by our own spark but were ignited by someone else's flame. Yet it also excites, for it connects us to a wider galactic drama, not as orphans but as participants. Even among skeptics, the fascination persists, because the hypothesis dramatizes the one question that refuses silence: are we alone? Deep down, we crave that answer. We return again and again to the pyramids, the temples, the geoglyphs, because they seem to whisper. Whether or not advanced visitors walked the earth alongside our ancestors, the monuments appear almost designed to lure us into wondering. They beckon across time, coaxing us to question if human history has chapters we no longer remember, chapters written in partnership with beings who came from the stars. Perhaps all of these wonders are products of human hands, sweat, and imagination alone, and perhaps that answer should be enough to satisfy. But because these monuments are so large, so stubborn, so resistant to the simplest explanations, they call to us. They demand stories big enough to hold their grandeur. The ancient astronaut hypothesis is one such story, bending science and myth together, igniting controversy, inspiring curiosity, and reminding us that the question of alien civilizations has never belonged to science fiction alone. It has always lived within the stones of pyramids, the lines across a desert, and the myths carried on human tongues for countless generations. There, hidden in plain sight, humanity preserved its wonder, its suspicion that Earth has never been entirely isolated. Whether myth, memory, or metaphor, that suspicion lives on, shaping us still, urging us always to look again upward, to the silent stars, and ask with hope, with awe, and perhaps with recognition, who came before, and who might come again. When we step from the broad myths of culture into the dust and stone of archaeology, the debate surrounding extraterrestrial civilizations grows more complicated. Ancient legends may be vague enough for interpretation, but artifacts and monuments, buried beneath soil for millennia and then delivered into the hands of modern researchers, possess an undeniable physicality. They resist dismissal and demand explanations. Archaeology provides humanity's record of itself, yet at times the record turns troublesome, objects that appear anachronistic, technologies seemingly out of place, structures raising questions that textbooks gloss over. This is the territory most fertile for the ancient astronaut hypothesis, because here material evidence intersects with imagination, here ordinary spades uncover mysteries that no mythology can contain. Out of the earth come puzzles that fuel speculation that something more than human ingenuity played a role in our deep past. Consider first the so-called out-of-place artifacts, items discovered in geological or archaeological contexts where they should not exist. Some of these turn out to be hoaxes or misinterpretations, yet others persist in puzzling even the most skeptical scholars. Carved stones in South America and Africa depict beings with elongated heads, sometimes surrounded by what look like helmets or rays of energy. Whether these are stylized human features or records of masked visitors from the sky is uncertain. In Colombia, the Quimbaya artifacts include small, gold objects shaped uncannily like airplanes, with wings, stabilizers, and vertical rudders. Mainstream archaeologists label them as stylized animals, dragonflies, or fish perhaps, but aerodynamic studies reveal that several models bear closer resemblance to delta-wing aircraft than to any creature in nature. To believers in ancient astronaut theory, these objects are miniature tributes or memory tokens, evidence that such forms were observed in the skies of pre-Columbian America long before humanity learned heavier-than-air flight. Egypt again provides fertile ground. Amid hieroglyphic inscriptions in the temple at Abydos appear shapes that some interpret as resembling modern machines, a helicopter, a submarine, even a jet plane. Scholars explain these as palimpsest, the overlapping of old carvings and newer ones creating strange coincidental forms. But to enthusiasts of extraterrestrial involvement, the visual similarity is almost too precise to dismiss. Did scribes observe flying machines and attempt clumsy representations in their sacred texts? Were these mere coincidences of erosion, or snapshots of a reality that no orthodox textbook allows? The controversy continues, yet the possibility embeds itself in the imagination. Another provocative artifact is the Antikythera mechanism of ancient Greece. Discovered in a shipwreck near Crete, this corroded bronze fragment shocked scholars when radiography revealed it to be a sophisticated gear-driven computer capable of predicting astronomical positions with remarkable accuracy. Dating to the 2nd century BCE, it embodies not only technological complexity but also a level of precision engineering unseen for a millennium afterward. History provides examples of lost knowledge, certainly, but the Antikythera remains so anomalous in its sophistication that some question whether Greek astronomy was aided by knowledge beyond its era. While few archaeologists invoke aliens directly, speculative writers have wondered whether such technology was the echo of an external spark, planted to leapfrog humanity forward in cosmic understanding. South America yields another enigma in the highlands of Bolivia, at the site known as Puma Punku, part of the Tiwanaku complex. Here colossal stones weighing hundreds of tons are scattered, carved with extraordinary precision, interlocking like pieces of a massive ancient puzzle. Some blocks bear cuts so straight and geometric that they resemble modern machine work, fitted with grooves and right angles at levels of precision difficult to achieve even with steel tools. Yet according to chronology, Puma Punku's builders lacked metal chisels and advanced technology. Mainstream archaeology wonders whether ancient artisans employed simple but effective techniques, a combination of stone hammers, sand abrasion, and incredible patience. But many remain unconvinced, pointing out that even replicating such cuts with today's equipment poses challenges. To those favoring the ancient astronaut hypothesis, Puma Punku preserves the workshop of a lost collaboration with cosmic engineers, its massive ruins testament to a civilization that received help beyond its capacity. Similarly, the megalithic site of Baalbek in Lebanon confounds explanation. At its heart rests the trilithon, 3 immense stone blocks each weighing over 800 tons, forming the foundation of a Roman temple complex built atop an earlier site. Transportation of such blocks even with modern cranes would pose challenges. The question is not merely how they were moved, but why such inconceivably massive stones were used at all when smaller, more manageable stones would suffice. Theories abound: specialized sleds, vast labor forces, or lost techniques of lubrication and roadways. Yet for ancient astronaut believers, the trilithon hints at technology able to lift and position weights beyond human capacity. Perhaps these stones formed a platform not for Roman worship but for something older and stranger, now overwritten by later construction. The sheer absurdity of their scale compels imaginations to reach toward explanations loftier than human hands. From artifacts to cave paintings, humanity has left images that seem to depict more than earthly experience. In the caves of Val Camonica in Italy, petroglyphs appear to show figures wearing what look like helmets with visors, akin to modern astronauts. In Australian Aboriginal rock art, the Wandjina spirits stand tall with large heads, featureless faces, and radiant halos. Scholars interpret these as stylized spiritual figures, yet they swiftly draw comparison to imagined extraterrestrials. Scholars argue for symbolic, ceremonial meaning, but the resemblance fuels speculation that early humanity recorded encounters through art, incapable of explaining visitors otherwise than through images of spirits walking among them. Even the Bible, beyond Ezekiel, carries cryptic traces. The Nephilim, giants born from the union of the sons of God and daughters of man, suggest strange unions between human beings and sky dwellers. Genesis records them laconically, as though they were an accepted piece of cultural knowledge. To theologians, they may symbolize fallen angels; to proponents of alien influence, they suggest genetic hybridization by visiting intelligences. If such interventions occurred, humanity's bloodline itself may carry echoes of extraterrestrial collaboration. In India, beyond Vimanas, one finds references to astonishing weapons catalogued in epics. Projectiles described as unleashing light brighter than 1,000 suns, turning the hair and fingernails of victims white, poisoning food and water, leveling cities in a single blast, sound uncannily similar to descriptions of nuclear warfare. Could the ancients simply have been allegorical geniuses, imagining powers of unreal scale? Or were these half-remembered accounts of catastrophic weaponry once actually observed, then mythologized? When Robert Oppenheimer, father of the atomic bomb, read lines from the Bhagavad Gita, he remarked upon their resonance with the dawning nuclear age: "Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds." The possibility that such weapon descriptions derive from observed reality invites speculation that human history is cyclical or influenced by powers testing technology on Earth long ago. Beyond individual artifacts and texts, there exist anomalies inadvertently produced by archaeology itself. Ancient tombs revealed skeletons with elongated skulls, achieved in some cultures through cranial binding, but in others without clear anthropological explanation. Some skulls discovered in Paracas, Peru, are elongated with cranial volumes larger than typical human capacity, not easily attributable to deformation. While mainstream science attributes most to cultural practices, others hold that some may represent hybrid physiology, signs of beings different from us who once shared the Earth. A similar intrigue surrounds reports of unusually tall skeletons found across North America in the 19th century, often described as giants. Many such stories prove exaggerations or fabrications, yet tantalizing accounts remain. In myths, giants recur universally: the Nephilim, the Titans, the Jotnar. Could they represent not titanic humans but another branch of intelligent life, erased and obscured, or introduced through contact with extraterrestrials? Opponents of these interpretations stress psychology and lost techniques. Cultures perform cranial binding to symbolize closer connection with gods, texts exaggerate to portray cosmic destruction, enormous stones can be moved with ingenious combinations of levers, ramps, and labor. And certainly many alleged anomalies find mundane explanation upon careful review. But what makes the ancient astronaut hypothesis appealing is the cumulative weight. Each site, each artifact might be dismissed individually, but together they create a chorus. Pyramid precision, inexplicable calendars, gigantic statues, anomalous skulls, gold objects shaped like aircraft all sing the same song of possibility. Either humanity independently generated an uncanny number of mysteries across its early centuries, or it encountered, hinted at, and then mythologized interventions beyond its capacity to fully comprehend. One cannot overlook, too, how archaeology is itself vulnerable to the limits of interpretation. A dig may uncover objects, but the story we attach to those objects is framed by our assumptions. If our assumption is that humanity must always be alone, then every mystery is forced into a human box. If our assumption shifts even slightly, to admit that others may have come before, then the box bursts open and the new interpretation collapses traditional timelines. The same artifact tells two utterly different histories, depending on the lens through which it is viewed. Other Nazca-lined ceremonial walkways, or signals to the sky. Other Quimbaya figurines insects, or aircraft. Other trilithon blocks feats of engineering genius, or footprints of titanic machines. Archaeology itself cannot fully decide. It provides stones and bones, but the story we tell is our choice. This is where humanity's imagination presses hard against evidence. We hunger for connection, for proof that the universe has already brushed us, already acknowledged us. The anomalies of archaeology provide that temptation. They are physical, undeniable, stubborn. They lie in the earth, whispering questions we cannot silence. And whether one finally accepts extraterrestrial involvement or maintains cautious skepticism, these artifacts accomplish something incredible. They keep alive the dialogue between Earth and stars, between myth and science, between what we know and what we refuse to believe. In the grand sweep of archaeology, the ancient astronaut hypothesis may never receive verification beyond doubt. But its endurance proves something about ourselves. Human beings, confronted with mystery, prefer to believe we are part of something larger. The monuments of Giza, the blocks of Baalbek, the ruins of Nazca, the gold plains of Quimbaya, they act as mirrors, showing back to us our own longing for connection with the infinite. Yet perhaps, hidden within them, there is more than longing. Perhaps fragments of truth remain, artifacts not simply of human labor but of a time when Earth was not isolated, when the touch of others left fingerprints not only in myth but in stone and metal, waiting across millennia for us to notice. And as our shovels dig deeper, our satellites scan wider, and our imagination stretches further, we keep returning to those ruins, those artifacts, those oddities. For in them lies not only the memory of the past but also the promise that we may one day confirm what the ancients already seemed to know, that from the beginning, our history may have been shared. When we speak about the possibility that ancient extraterrestrial civilizations may have touched the course of humanity, few ideas are as provocative or unsettling as the hypothesis of genetic intervention. For to suggest that monuments were guided, calendars influenced, All myths inspired is one thing, it appeals to culture, to imagination, even to pride in collaboration. But to suggest that our very bodies, our DNA, the foundations of what it means to be human, may carry within them traces of alien design, that is to touch not only history but identity, biology, and the very notion of human uniqueness. It implies that we are not the sole authors of ourselves, but co-creations, engineered or nudged by others whose hands reached across the cosmos into the crucible of life. This hypothesis is controversial because it dares to trespass on sacred ground, the origin of humanity itself. Yet it recurs again and again in myth, in text, in speculation, because the possibility it raises is too compelling to forget. In evolutionary science, humanity is understood as the product of a branching lineage of primates, descended from ancestors in Africa, refined and shaped by millions of years of natural selection. We are told that from Australopithecus to Homo habilis, from Homo erectus to Homo sapiens, the record is gradual, punctuated by adaptation and survival. Yet even within this framework, enigmas remain. The sudden leap of intelligence, the emergence of language, the appearance of abstract thought, art, and architecture seem astonishingly compressed against the backdrop of geological time. Within a mere 200,000 years, a blink in cosmic chronology, humans rose from small bands of hunters to builders of cities, creators of mathematics, architects of empires. Critics of orthodox theory ask whether natural evolution alone can explain such rapid acceleration, or whether the bridge from ape-like ancestors to symbol-using modern humans required an external push. The ancient astronaut hypothesis rephrases this riddle as a story of contact. Imagine a world where early humans, wandering the savannas, are visited by beings of greater technological and biological mastery. These beings, confronted with a clever but unfinished species, experiment with genetic modification, altering DNA to accelerate intelligence, coordination, language. Myth becomes the memory of laboratory. The gods shaping clay figures could be memories of genetic engineering, the spark of civilization, the product not of accident but of design. This idea challenges both religious orthodoxy and secular pride, yet it resonates because fragments of story across civilizations echo the same claim: humankind was created, shaped, or uplifted by those who came down from the heavens. Take the Sumerian accounts again. The Enuma Elish and related texts describe gods forming mankind to serve them, mingling their essence with that of earthly beings. Some translations suggest that the Anunnaki, celestial visitors, fashioned humans using their own blood and genetic material, binding heaven and earth into a hybrid species. Such language, once seen as mythic metaphor, becomes uncanny when viewed through the glasses of modern genetics. Was this story simply a poetic account of divine origin, or an unclear memory of advanced beings performing literal manipulation of organisms? The suggestion that humans might be hybrids, part terrestrial, part extraterrestrial, arises naturally from such myths. Biblical texts too carry hints. The Genesis narrative declares that man was crafted in the image of God. Later verses describe the Nephilim, the mysterious giants of old, born when the sons of God took the daughters of men. Mainstream theology interprets this as divine beings or angels engaging with mortals, but the words can also be read as the recollection of hybridization, offspring born of unions between human women and otherworldly visitors. The consequences of such unions are recorded as catastrophic. God, displeased, sends the flood. But still the story plants the seed. Humanity, in its most ancient religious traditions, remembers itself as touched genetically by beings from beyond. Some possessed size and power that humans themselves could not achieve. Was this memory of real difference, of flesh unlike our own? Cross to Greece, and mythology provides another resonance. The pantheon of Olympian gods is forever mating with mortals, producing demigods who stand greater, stronger, or wiser than ordinary men. Hercules, Perseus, Achilles all are figures of extraordinary capability, justified by their half-divine parentage. In a strictly religious context, these are symbolic unions between heaven and earth. But what if one frames them as accounts of external beings interacting directly with human biology? To those who interpret myth through the extraterrestrial lens, the demigod is the hybrid child, evidence of ancient genetic mixing. In myth, they shine with supernatural qualities. In scientific imagination, they might represent the first cases of human DNA altered or integrated with foreign code. India, with its vast epic traditions, offers similar themes. Gods descend, intermarry, and alter humanity with weapons and powers beyond comprehension. The avatars of Vishnu appear again and again, reshaping humanity's destiny at crucial turning points. Some readings of the Sanskrit text suggest specific descriptions of beings creating or experimenting with life, adjusting the blueprint of creatures. Are these only allegories of divine guidance, or misremembered accounts of biological intervention from intelligences advanced enough to manipulate genetics as easily as clay? The prospect of alien manipulation of DNA gains further intrigue when considered alongside modern discoveries. In the genome of Homo sapiens appear peculiar anomalies, stretches of DNA that seem sudden, without gradual introduction, and differences that separate us sharply from our nearest evolutionary cousins, the chimpanzees and Neanderthals. One such puzzle is the so-called chromosome 2 fusion event, where two ancestral chromosomes fused into one, giving humans 46 chromosomes instead of the 48 of other primates. This event distinguished us dramatically, influencing our development. To orthodox science, it was a natural mutation preserved because it carried adaptive benefits. To enthusiasts of the intervention hypothesis, the precision of the fusion, with remnants of telomeres and centromeres stacked upon each other, looks almost deliberate, as though performed through high-level bioengineering. Other mysteries persist. The so-called junk DNA, once dismissed as evolutionary clutter, now appears to harbor regulatory capacities and latent information we do not fully understand. Could elements of it be code not fully unlocked, remnants of programming by external hands? Researchers discovered sequences of DNA whose function is unknown yet which bear markers of potential information compression. While mainstream science does not leap to extraterrestrial conclusions, speculative thinkers argue that our very biology is a script, written partially by others. If humanity itself is a designed organism, then every cell testifies to intervention. Legends across the globe align eerily with such interpretations. The Zulu traditions of South Africa tell of the Shitorai, sky gods who came down, enslaved humans, and interbred with them to produce hybrids of greater ability. The Dogon, beyond their astronomical lore, speak of Nomo beings from Sirius who created humanity. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl is not only a teacher but sometimes described as reshaping humans into their present form, rescuing them from primitive states. Polynesian stories describe visitors teaching local populations agriculture and navigation, as though elevating them from raw animality into organized civilization. Such myths, seen collectively, construct a chorus: humanity was made by others, not from nothing, but upgraded, intervened upon, shaped. Skeptics argue differently. Human evolution, they insist, though fast in geological terms, is still consistent with natural variation and selection. The leap to language, to creativity, remains mysterious, yes, but not beyond the scope of adaptation driven by environmental pressures and the growing social complexity of hominid groups. They accuse proponents of the alien hypothesis of a perpetual God of the gaps approach whenever science has not fully explained a development. Speculation inserts extraterrestrials. Yet believers counter with the unusual consistency of myth. Thousands of cultures, across thousands of years, all declare the same, that humanity is the child of the heavens. Could such uniformity truly be coincidence, born only of imagination? Or does it suggest a truth disguised within narrative form? Psychologists point out that myths of divine creation mirror human parental experience. God's building clay figures is equivalent to humans building families, extended upward to cosmic scale. Cross-cultural similarities, they argue, prove only the universality of metaphor, not the universality of contact. Religious scholars add that the word sons of God, angels, or demigods need not imply genetic activity, only sacred symbolism. But for minds restless with unanswered questions, these explanations seem inadequate. They explain why myths exist, but not why they often describe tangible procedures: flesh made from clay, blood mixed with divine essence, hybrid offspring. The details cry for concrete interpretation. If one entertains the genetic intervention hypothesis as true, the implications are staggering. For one, humanity is not an evolutionary accident but a crafted entity. We are not simply primates shaped by random mutations, but intentional projects designed by others for purposes unknown. Were we made as laborious, as the Sumerians suggest? Are we a genetic experiment, seeded to observe what intelligence becomes in planetary conditions? Or are we simply one branch of galactic biology, cultivated to join a network of civilizations once grown enough to survive? The uncertainty unsettles but also transforms our self-understanding. No longer unique children of Earth, we become cousins in a larger galactic family, our DNA the handshake of encounter long forgotten. One troubling dimension of this hypothesis is control. If indeed others intervened in our evolution, they may still consider us their property or project. This idea appears in modern abduction folklore, where individuals claim genetic experiments conducted by strange beings continue in the present, harvesting ova, sperm, or embryos for purposes unexplained. In these accounts, the narrative of intervention is not ancient but ongoing, suggesting that what began millennia ago might still unfold. For skeptics, such reports are psychological phenomena, hallucinations born of cultural fears. For believers, they represent the continuation of a story carved in Sumerian clay and sung in Greek epic. Scientific evidence remains circumstantial at best. Archaeology produces no clear laboratory equipment, only myths of gods shaping clay. Genetics reveals anomalies, but none that demand extraterrestrial solutions to explain. Yet the hypothesis persists because it explains mysteries science has not yet resolved: the sudden rise of consciousness, imagination, and language. It weaves together myth and biology, producing a narrative where the spark of human culture is both natural and supernatural, both evolved and engineered. Whether true or not, its cultural impact is profound. To imagine ourselves as hybrids is to rethink religion not as the worship of supernatural beings but as memory of our makers. It recasts divinity as technology misunderstood, prayer as dialogue with those who wrote part of our genetic code. It shifts humanity's pride but not to diminish it. For even if we were guided, our achievements are not less but more, creatures capable of art, mathematics, love, and philosophy, rising even if from seeds planted by distant hands. To be a created hybrid is not to be a slave, necessarily, but to be part of a lineage extending beyond Earth, a species with roots not only in Africa but in the stars. The genetic intervention hypothesis thus stands as one of the most daring arms of the ancient astronaut theory. It refuses subtlety, reaching directly into the heart of who we are. If monuments invite speculation, DNA demands it. If myths tease, genomes whisper enigmas. Science may one day prove definitively whether our chromosomes bear foreign insertion or not. Until then, the story remains suspended, half faith, half suspicion, but always magnetic in its implications. For when we hold ourselves in mirrors, asking where we come from, the answer may not be Earth alone. The answer may lie encoded in every cell, a code older than memory, written in silence by hands from another world. The story of extraterrestrial civilizations does not end in myths, pyramids, and forgotten epics. While those remnants of antiquity provide the deep roots of speculation, the modern era brought a new stage for contact narratives, one bathed not in stone inscriptions or sacred poetry but in radar echoes, photographs blurred against the sky, military reports, and the testimony of ordinary individuals. If the ancient astronaut hypothesis compels us to re-examine our past, then the phenomena of UFOs, the unidentified flying objects that populate the skies of the 20th and 21st centuries, press us to think about our present. They suggest that if others once visited, perhaps they never left, or at least that they have periodically returned. Here, recorded in the texture of modern life, is where speculation about extraterrestrial civilizations confronts science, governments, and cultures directly. The question leaps off mythological tablets and lands upon radar screens, jet fighter cockpits, and news broadcasts. The phrase flying saucer emerged in 1947 when pilot Kenneth Arnold reported seeing 9 gleaming objects darting across the sky near Mount Rainier in Washington state, moving in a strange skipping motion at impossible speeds. Newspapers seized upon his analogy like saucers skipping over water, and a cultural sensation was born. Almost overnight, flying saucers flooded the public imagination. People began to report metallic discs, glowing lights, and cigar-shaped craft in the skies. Were these all hallucinations? Collective hysteria? Or had the burgeoning age of aviation and radar drawn back a curtain hiding visitors who had always been present? As the Cold War spread unease, governments could not afford to ignore stacks of reports. In the United States, the Air Force launched Project Sign in 1948, Project Grudge in 1949, and later the more famous Project Blue Book, seeking to collect, analyze, and categorize UFO sightings. Thousands of reports were sifted, many explained as balloons, aircraft, or optical phenomena, but hundreds stubbornly resisted explanation. Some cases had multiple witnesses, even corroboration by pilots trained to observe. Some were recorded on radar as solid intrusions moving at speeds beyond known technology. J. Allen Hynek, an astronomer initially enrolled as a debunker for the Air Force, gradually shifted his perspective. Over time, he concluded that a real phenomenon existed, one not easily dismissed, fodder for science if only science dared to approach without prejudice. Among the most dramatic cases was the 1947 incident near Roswell, New Mexico. Rumors spread of a crashed flying saucer retrieved by the military, accompanied by stories of alien bodies. The official explanation of a weather balloon did little to stem speculation. Over decades, Roswell became more myth than event, a nexus of secrecy and imagination, inspiring countless books, films, and theories. Was it a balloon project silenced by Cold War anxieties, or the most famous cover-up in human history? The persistence of the story reveals less about the object itself than about our culture's hunger for revelation and mistrust of authority. The 1950s and 60s produced a cascade of cases. Pilots reported being paced by luminous disks. Radar operators confirmed blips displaying maneuvers impossible for known craft, including sudden stops, sharp right-angle turns, and acceleration to supersonic speeds without sonic booms. Civilian witnesses described abductions, visions, missing time. Some of these stories were laughable, riddled with contradictions. Others were unnervingly consistent. The Betty and Barney Hill case of 1961, for example, described a close encounter in which the couple reported being taken aboard a craft, medically examined, and shown star charts. Under hypnosis, Betty Hill described a map indicating a binary system unknown to her, later compared to the star Zeta Reticuli. For skeptics, these were artifacts of suggestion under hypnosis. For believers, they represented humanity's first detailed abduction narrative, one that would set the template for decades of similar accounts. Governments worldwide responded in complex ways. In France, the Gaipan program began studying aerial phenomena. In the Soviet Union, state agencies tracked UFOs and concealed reports. In the United States, encounters near nuclear facilities disturbed officials. Unknown craft seemed to deactivate missiles or hover over silos, suggesting interest in humanity's deadliest technology. Could this be coincidence, hysteria, deliberate fabrication? Or was it a message, silently delivered in the skies, that those with greater power objected to humanity's flotation with annihilation? As the decades passed, the phenomenon adapted. In the 1970s and 80s, abduction reports surged. Strikingly similar details repeated: beings small, humanoid, with large eyes and featureless faces, medical procedures involving reproductive material, communication through telepathy. Critics saw cultural contagion, science fiction spawning false memories. Advocates pointed to the unnerving convergence, as if an archetype were pressing itself into the minds of experiencers. Hypnosis sessions recovered elaborate stories of hybrid programs, experiments, and warnings about ecological catastrophe. Whether psychological, cultural, or genuinely extraterrestrial, these narratives entered mass consciousness and reshaped popular visions of aliens. In parallel, military encounters continued. In 1980 at Rendlesham Forest, American airmen stationed in England reported strange lights, a landed craft, and physical traces left in soil and trees. Official responses dismissed the events, but tapes and testimonies persisted, making it one of the best documented European sightings. In 2004, off the coast of California, U.S., Navy pilots encountered tic-tac objects, white, featureless craft performing accelerations and maneuvers impossible by known physics. Radar confirmed solid returns. These accounts were disclosed in 2017, sparking renewed attention even in mainstream outlets like the New York Times. That major navies recorded unexplained craft, moving without wings or exhaust at hypersonic speeds, suddenly made the topic respectable. worldwide patterns deepened the puzzle. In Brazil, waves of sightings included close encounters resulting in burns and physiological effects. In Belgium in 1989 and 1990, hundreds reported massive, triangular craft drifting silently overhead, corroborated by police officers and radar. In Chile, government aviation agencies released UFO footage officially deemed unexplained. The global nature of sightings suggested not parochial hallucinations but something persistent, transcultural. Theories multiplied. Some remain terrestrial, secret military projects, experimental aircraft, drones decades ahead of disclosure. These explanations may fit some cases, but the variety of shapes, disks, cigar shapes, triangles, spheres, and the bizarre physics they seem to demonstrate resist simple categorization. Others turned again to extraterrestrial civilizations. If the universe is populated, why would they not send probes, scouts, ships to observe us? UFO sightings then become not anomalies but confirmation. Myth and archaeology are linked to real, ongoing surveillance. Yet the problem of evidence remains. Photographs blur, videos pixelate, radar logs are often withheld. Governments admit some things only to conceal others. For the skeptic, UFOs are a social phenomenon, reflecting anxiety, technology, and culture more than the stars. But even skepticism strains when pilots with thousands of hours report impossible maneuvers, when radar shows objects accelerating from subsonic to hypersonic in seconds, when nuclear facilities experience shutdowns accompanied by luminous objects hovering overhead. How many coincidences must pile before a phenomenon deserves new categories of explanation? The cultural impact of UFOs has been immense. They became icons of the modern age, filling cinema screens with motherships and abductions, cartoons and novels, skepticism and awe. They gave modern societies what gods and sky beings once gave ancients, a canvas upon which to project hopes, fears, and questions. For some, the aliens became saviors watchers ensuring we do not destroy ourselves. For others, they became sinister abductors, harvesting genetic material, treating humans as laboratory animals. In both forms, they reflect something essential about human psychology, a refusal to believe we are the sole intelligence in the universe, and a suspicion that powers greater than ourselves move invisibly in the background of history. Interestingly, the shape of reported craft seems to evolve with time. In the 1950s, they were saucers, polished and metallic, matching the aesthetic of the atomic age. In the 1980s, enormous silent triangles appeared, echoing stealth aircraft then in development. In the 2000s, the tic-tac craft featureless, smooth, minimal emerged alongside the aesthetics of drones and smartphones. Are we projecting our own technology into the sky, or are real visitors adopting forms that blend with expectation? This mystery complicates every interpretation. The phenomenon seems to exist both as physical event and as mirror of culture. Those who attempt to study UFOs seriously often reach the edge of paradox. On one hand, clear data exists, radar cases, testimonies from military pilots, photographs, trace evidence of scorched vegetation. On the other hand, definitive, repeatable proof remains elusive. Objects retreat, vanish, or appear only at the edges of perception. Some researchers propose an interdimensional hypothesis. These are real phenomena, but not necessarily craft from planets. They could be visitors from parallel realities, slipping briefly into ours. This idea still affirms contact with intelligences but complicates the extraterrestrial framing. Yet for those who see continuity between ancient myths and modern reports, such boundary crossing explains both. Gods descending in fire may be the same as saucers flickering on radar, described according to the language of the era. The secrecy surrounding the phenomenon only heightens suspicion. Governments, particularly in the United States, for decades pursued a strategy of dismiss, ridicule, and classify. Witnesses were marginalized, data hidden. Why, critics ask, if there is nothing to the phenomenon? Why the effort to suppress? Some point to simple national security concerns. Unexplained objects could reveal weaknesses if openly admitted. Others whisper of darker truths, that governments know more than they admit, perhaps possessing crashed craft, perhaps aware of ongoing contact. Roswell remains paradigmatic, but rumors of underground storage facilities, reverse engineering projects, and secret pacts between governments and extraterrestrials proliferate. Proof remains absent, but the silence becomes its own evidence for believers. At the same time, cultural evolution has made UFOs more than oddities. They have become symbols of humanity's longing for connection. People gather at remote deserts hoping for contact, not in fear but in hope. The image of the alien shifted slowly from conqueror to visitor, from abductor to guide. Some experiencers report benevolent communications, urging ecological responsibility or peaceful behavior. Others describe trauma and violation. Like mythic gods who could both bless and punish, modern aliens embody our dual fears and desires. They are whatever we need them to be: salvation, control, oversight, or warning. Ultimately, the modern era of UFOs reveals something profound. The question of extraterrestrial civilizations has moved beyond speculation into lived experience for thousands who believe they have seen or encountered craft. Whether these represent actual visitors from the stars, secret technologies of earthly nations, or psychological projections, the fact remains, the phenomenon is real in its effects. It changes policy, influences culture, provokes investigation, and shapes our identity as a species. Even skeptics must grant that UFO has become one of the defining myths of the modern world. Only this myth has radar returns and cockpit camera footage behind it. For those linking ancient and modern, the continuity is irresistible. The gods who once descended on flaming chariots are now discs on radar. The sky beings who produced hybrids are echoed in abduction narratives of genetic harvest. The monuments aligned to constellations are paired with modern craft hovering above nuclear bases, as if guardianship continues. If extraterrestrial civilizations exist and visit, then they are not strangers but recurring actors in the human drama, always nearby, shaping but never fully revealed. Now, decades into the UFO era, with governments at last releasing declassified footage, the question grows sharper: are we on the threshold of confirmation? Will evidence one day leap from grainy video to undeniable encounter? And if so, how will humanity react? For some, it will be the shattering of religion and philosophy. For others, the fulfillment of myth. For all, it will mean that we are, as many have always insisted, part of a larger community of intelligences, our skies busier than they appear, our history entangled with presences from beyond. Whether watchers, abductors, experimenters, or missionaries, the UFO phenomenon insists upon one electrifying truth: the universe presses upon us through the sky, and we, still uncertain, stand looking upward, aware that the stars may already be aware of us. When conversations about alien civilizations reach into myth, archaeology, monuments, or even UFOs darting across military radar, the question is repeatedly posed in terms of physical evidence: what structures they might have helped build, what machines they might have flown, what biological legacies they might have left behind. Yet there exists another layer of possibility, less material but perhaps equally profound: the idea that extraterrestrial intelligences may have influenced humanity indirectly, through inspiration, communication of ideas, or symbolic guidance, rather than overt construction or genetic manipulation. This hypothesis dwells in the shadows, where myth overlaps with art, where visions overlap with invention, where cultural archetypes spring unbidden from the depths of imagination yet carry strange consistencies across place and time. Rather than chiseling stones or rearranging chromosomes, perhaps the others have whispered into our dreams or seeded our myths, nudging human civilization through subtler channels toward directions of knowledge, morality, and imagination. Human beings have always been receptive to visions. Shamans of Paleolithic tribes spoke with spirits, prophets of Israel communicated with burning voices, ascetics of India received revelations in meditative trance. In modern terminology, such visions might be considered hallucinations, neurological events within human brains. But what if some fraction of these visions encoded communications not generated from within, but transmitted from beyond? The mechanism could be telepathic projection, or subtle technological influence, or something we cannot yet name, an energy of consciousness itself. What if alien civilizations, rather than landing craft or erecting temples, spoke to us in the only language early humanity could understand: dream, symbol, and myth? Dreams have, after all, often preceded discovery. Kekulé, father of organic chemistry, claimed the structure of the benzene ring came to him while dreaming of a serpent biting its own tail. Countless inventors describe flashes of inspiration that arrive fully formed, as if given. Isolated prophets across continents proclaimed visions of radiant beings imparting laws for moral conduct or cosmology far ahead of their era. Moses descends from Sinai with commandments hewn in fire and smoke. Muhammad receives the Quran from the angel Jibreel. St. John beholds revelations of cosmic war in apocalyptic visions. To believers, these are sacred moments in which divine power touches mortals. To those seeking extraterrestrial influences, they may represent transmissions from advanced minds across a gulf of comprehension. The laws were encoded in human idiom, the visions wrapped in religious metaphor, because the contact had to be absorbed not in equations but in faith. Even great works of art and architecture have been described by their creators as dictated from elsewhere. Medieval composers insisted their music was heard from the heavens. Poets across centuries describe themselves not as creators but as receivers, mediums of muses who whispered. Michelangelo spoke of seeing forms already existing within the marble, only releasing them with chisel. Modern artists describe their inspiration in terms uncannily similar to channeling. Could it be that culture itself is a transmission, our music, mathematics, and myth seeded by impulses suggested from outside humanity? If extraterrestrials wish to influence us without overwhelming us, this would be the path, not massive intervention, but suggestions disguised as inspiration, ideas carried quietly into receptive minds. The universality of certain symbols in human culture supports this suspicion. Carl Jung wrote extensively about archetypes: the Great Mother, the hero, the trickster, the wise old man. These figures recur across mythologies separated by oceans and millennia. Jung interpreted them as expressions of a collective unconscious innate to the human psyche. But others wonder if archetypes might represent not only our biology but external influence, the same messages whispered into tribes in Africa, caves of Europe, valleys of Asia, forming a universal symbolic vocabulary. Could the hero's journey, repeated from Gilgamesh to Jesus to Luke Skywalker, be a script implanted to encourage humanity toward particular patterns of growth and behavior? Was Prometheus bringing fire to mortals merely a myth, or an encoded memory of knowledge shared from the stars, a gift disguised as rebellion? Consider again the ancient religions. Egyptian myths describe Thoth, the ibis-headed god, bringing writing and astronomy. Sumerian records describe Enki bestowing civilization. Mesoamerican myths describe Quetzalcoatl as the feathered serpent who gifted agriculture, calendars, and governance, later vowing to return. These gods may be interpreted not as physical beings erecting monuments but as knowledge bringers, tutors of symbolic and practical arts. Humanity may have developed agriculture and writing on its own, yes, but perhaps the myths represent catalytic events of influence, a push at the right time, coming not from within but from somewhere far beyond. We may also interpret the presence of ubiquitous star symbolism in early cultures as a kind of indirect influence. When tribes painted constellations on cave walls, when they aligned temples to solstices, when the Maya tracked Venus with uncanny precision, it represented more than curiosity about night lights. It was a fixation, as though the stars were not only imagination's home but communication's destination. This could be merely instinct, humans marveling at the night like children at mystery. Or it could be that generations were responding to subtle encouragement, nudged into recording cosmic knowledge beyond their apparent need. If extraterrestrial civilization sought to ensure humanity's eventual step into space, what better way than embedding fascination with the heavens deep in culture's foundations? Every temple, every myth aligning with stars, every story of descent and return, becomes less about records of physical landing and more about shaping the psyche of a species, preparing us to see ourselves as inheritors not of Earth alone but of sky. Historians point to the Renaissance as another strange flowering of sudden inspiration. After centuries of relative stagnation in Europe, ideas erupted: science, geometry, cosmology, art. Copernicus proposed a heliocentric world, Galileo turned telescopes upward, and Bruno envisioned an infinite cosmos filled with innumerable worlds. Where did such audacity spring from? Perhaps it was the culmination of human thought, reaching tipping point. But perhaps, whispers the alien hypothesis, such leaps were encouraged indirectly, guiding humanity toward conceptions of cosmos broad enough to one day imagine others. Giordano Bruno declared openly that countless Earths harbored countless beings. His vision reads less like theology and more like the faint echo of an idea pressed into culture from beyond. His martyrdom at the stake could be interpreted not only as resistance of church orthodoxy but as symbolic resistance of humanity itself toward the whisper of the greater cosmos. In the modern era, inspiration and symbolism may still be the chosen methods of influence. The explosion of science fiction in the 20th century produced visions eerily predictive: rockets to the moon, submarines, communication satellites. H.G. Wells and Jules Verne dreamed echoes of technology that would later manifest with precision. Did these authors simply extrapolate shrewdly from trends, or were they, like ancient prophets, receptive to transmissions cloaked in imagination? Arthur C. Clarke envisioned satellites precisely at geostationary orbit decades before they became reality. He attributed it to scientific reasoning, but the question remains, why do certain imaginations leap so far ahead? Perhaps genius is only genius, but perhaps genius is sometimes the ability to hear the signal inside the static, to catch faint outlines of suggestions projected into the fabric of human thought by presences older and vaster than ourselves. The indirect approach resolves many paradoxes. If extraterrestrial civilizations wished to influence humanity without destroying our autonomy, they would not land fleets on Washington lawns or demand worship overtly. They would sow ideas quietly, letting humans believe discoveries were their own. They would work through dream, myth, and inspiration, giving us the dignity of imagining ourselves as authors while gradually steering us toward readiness for cosmic membership. Heavy-handed interference might crush us or warp our trajectory. Subtle symbolic nudges keep us intact. The embodiment of gods in myth, the universal fascination with stars, the sudden bursts of invention, all could be signs of indirect influence, pressure applied not to the hands building but to the minds imagining. This also explains why so often cultural encounters with the other provoke simultaneous awe and terror. When prophets describe luminous beings, when abductees in modern times describe telepathic communications, they often report overwhelming emotion, a conviction of vast intelligence reaching their minds. What they report varies in detail, but what repeats is the sense of message. Sometimes the message is moral: humanity must live peacefully, must guard its environment. Sometimes the message is symbolic: visions of great wheels, lights, stars connected in web. Both ancient prophecy and modern encounter converge in the belief that the contact is about influence, not conquest. Conquest would have revealed itself long ago. Influence leaves scars in story, imagination, art, and dream. Consider how many of humanity's great leaps of imagination were resisted at first as heresy or madness. The Earth not at the center. Invisible microscopic organisms causing disease. Machines speaking across oceans. Each appeared first in dream or strange inspiration, then manifested as science. Some argue this is precisely what distinguishes us from animals: our imagination moves ahead of necessity. But what if part of that imagination was not entirely internal? What if at intervals, ideas were planted like seeds, waiting for minds fertile enough to carry them forward? Then human history becomes a dialogue, not just of environment and adaptation, but of transmission and reception, of subtle mentorship across an unfathomable gulf. Skeptics of extraterrestrial influence counter that inspiration is naturally explained by neurology, by subconscious capabilities producing leaps into consciousness. They argue that the universality of myth can be explained by common psychology. They emphasize that genius appears rare but consistent, a bell curve of brain power requiring no alien whisper. And yet we cannot entirely dismiss the allure. The evidence may be circumstantial, but the cumulative suggestiveness is strong. When inspiration arrives like lightning, when symbols recur like echoes across cultures, we suspect a signal. And because humanity has always yearned for company in the night sky, we allow ourselves to interpret that signal as indirect contact. If it is true, then extraterrestrials have been our invisible teachers since the beginning. They gave us myths of gods to guide our civilizations, visions to shape our religions, archetypes to structure our stories, and whispers to kindle our inventions. They did not impose, but inspired, leaving our free will intact yet giving us subtle direction. Perhaps they are gardeners across the galaxy, tending young intelligences not with iron hand but with careful suggestion, planting star fascination in us so that one day, when our rockets reach outward, we will do so not blindly but with preparation. For humanity, the recognition of such influence would revolutionize self-understanding. We would see ourselves not as children of chance, tossed by evolution, but as participants in a grand project of meaning spanning beyond Earth. Our art becomes not only our own, but the result of collaboration with unseen mentors. Our religions are no longer only human projections, but perhaps translations of cosmic conversation. Civilization itself, in this light, is not merely invention but partnership, a long dance between terrestrial striving and extraterrestrial guidance. Whether true or not, the hypothesis of indirect influence enriches the sense of mystery. It allows myths and art to stand again as sources of awe, concealing in poetic language events more extraordinary than their authors knew. It gives dignity to imagination, presenting it not as fancy but as channel, a receiver of currents flowing invisibly from stars. It ties together the Neolithic alignment of megaliths with modern novels of space exploration, the visions of Ezekiel with tales of abductees, the songs of shamans with revelations of scientists. Across time, the motif is the same: ideas larger than us arrived unexpectedly, reshaped us, and compelled us toward the future. Perhaps humanity will one day confirm this. Perhaps with genetic science or advanced media we will find a literal signal encoded within DNA, an artifact left by prior visitors, proof that inspiration is not metaphor but design. Or perhaps not. Perhaps the influence will never be provable, remaining forever a fertile hypothesis, whispering across myth and imagination. Yet even if unprovable, it compels us to imagine ourselves differently, as potentially guided, as possibly connected, as already in quiet dialogue with the cosmos. And such imagination prepares us for real encounter, should ships ever descend with undeniable clarity. For then we will not say, "They are strangers," but "They are teachers we have always known, the voices already in our myths, the muses already in our minds." And when that recognition dawns, the weight of history, every temple, every song, every dream may suddenly align as a record not of delusion, but of subtle communion. Humanity will glimpse itself as a species raised on stories not wholly its own, shaped by symbols sent from beyond. Whether angels or aliens, gods or visitors, the result is the same: our past, our art, our very sense of wonder has always borne their fingerprints, indirect yet indelible, written into the language of our souls. When the conversation turns from myths and archaeology, from whispered stories of gods and the contested evidence of UFOs, to the terrain of science itself, it acquires a different tone, rigorous, mathematical, methodical. Yet the subject remains the same at its heart. The scientific search for extraterrestrial civilizations is simply humanity's most disciplined and technologically sophisticated way of asking the oldest question we know: are we alone in the universe? Unlike myths or symbolic speculations, science performs the inquiry through telescopes instead of temples, through radio waves instead of rituals, yet at its core the longing is identical. To gaze at the night sky and realize that hundreds of billions of stars ignite in our galaxy alone, trillions more across billions of galaxies, is to confront a silence so massive that it becomes unbearable. Surely such immensity cannot exist only for us? Surely somewhere out there, life has arisen, intelligence has awakened, civilizations have flourished. And if so, why have they not come? Why does the night whisper nothing back, though our instruments strain so hard to hear? That silence is both science's sharpest paradox and philosophy's heaviest burden. The paradox was perhaps most famously expressed by the Italian physicist Enrico Fermi in the mid-20th century. At lunch with colleagues in Los Alamos, after a discussion of interstellar flight, he posed the simple, devastating question, where is everybody? Given the age of the galaxy, the number of stars, and the possibility of ships spreading outward even at sublight speeds, civilization should have had ample time to fill the Milky Way. Yet we see no evidence. This so-called Fermi paradox has since haunted both astronomers and philosophers. It suggests either that civilizations are far rarer than we wish, or that something prevents us from observing them, or that some catastrophic filter prevents civilizations from reaching longevity. For those fascinated by extraterrestrial civilizations, the paradox is a wound in the immensity of the cosmos. It insists upon absence where imagination insists upon multitudes. The attempts to address the paradox are as diverse as they are imaginative. Some argue that we are indeed alone, a product of improbable circumstances, perched precariously at the only oasis of intelligence within a dead sea of stars. Others suggest civilizations do emerge but collapse quickly under the weight of their own technologies, annihilating themselves through war, ecological ruin, or artificial intelligence before spreading outward. Still others imagine that civilizations might exist and thrive but choose silence, deliberately avoiding detection, cloaking themselves in radio quietude. This idea, termed the zoo hypothesis, imagines Earth as an exhibit under observation, with advanced beings deciding not to reveal themselves until humanity matures. More speculative still are suggestions that alien civilizations may exist at levels of technology or consciousness so advanced as to be unrecognizable to us, manifesting not as ships in clouds but as patterns in space-time, fields of energy, or even alterations of physics itself. Into this uncertainty steps the scientific method, searching not for stories but for signals. The 20th century saw the birth of SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Astronomers like Frank Drake pointed radio telescopes at the sky and listened. The rationale was simple: just as humans broadcast radio and television, so might other civilizations. Perhaps their spillover signals would drift across space like invisible beacons, waiting for any species to receive them. Drake created his famous equation, multiplying probabilities to estimate the number of civilizations that might exist, the rate of star formation, the fraction with planets, the fraction with habitable conditions, the probability of life emerging, the probability of intelligence, the length of time civilizations broadcast detectable signals. Though each factor was uncertain, the result often suggested not emptiness but multitudes. For a time, SETI represented one of science's boldest and most romantic projects. Arrays of radio dishes scanned across the sky. Signals were filtered for narrowband carriers unlikely to be natural. In 1977, the Ohio State University Big Ear Radio Telescope recorded what became known as the WOW signal, a sudden, unexplained burst of radio intensity in a precise frequency band, annotated with astonishment in the data margins. No follow-up ever repeated the detection, and it remains one of astronomy's tantalizing mysteries. Was it cosmic interference, a distant pulsar, or for one brief moment, a civilization saying hello to an uncaring cosmos? The silence since then has been deafening, yet the memory of that brief anomaly continues to fuel SETI's hope. Over decades, new methods joined the search. The Hubble Space Telescope, Kepler mission, and now the James Webb Space Telescope unleashed revolutions in exoplanet discovery. Where once astronomers debated whether planets might even exist around other stars, we now know thousands of them, catalogued in exquisite detail. Some are gas giants hugging stars, Others are rocky worldlets scorched by radiation, but many fall within habitable zones, regions where liquid water could exist. Suddenly, the galaxy appears not barren but crowded with potentially life-friendly planets. The sheer numbers stagger imagination. If billions of Earth-like worlds exist, surely life has blossomed somewhere. This discovery altered the context of the search. We are almost certainly not the only biology. The question is whether any of that biology has awakened into civilization. Yet again, silence follows. Searches for biosignatures, chemical clues of life, such as oxygen and methane in planetary atmospheres, remain in infancy but show promise. Spectroscopy may soon reveal planets with gases in disequilibrium, probable evidence of metabolism. Beyond this lies the hunt for technosignatures, artificial light on a planet's night side, industrial pollutants in atmospheres, or engineered waste heat shining in infrared. Astronomers propose scanning stars for unusual dimming that might hint at megastructures, like Dyson spheres, massive constructs capturing stellar energy. Brief excitement erupted around the star KIC 8462852, Tabby S star, which displayed strange dips in brightness inconsistent with planets. Some leapt to the notion of alien technology. Further study suggested clouds of dust or comets. Yet the moment exemplified how hungry science is to seize even faint anomalies as hope of contact. The scientific search is not limited to passively listening. Proposals exist for active SETI or METI messaging, extraterrestrial intelligence sending deliberate signals announcing our presence. Some scientists argue this is reckless, inviting attention from civilizations of unknown intent. Others argue it is inevitable and even necessary, a bold step to break the silence. Already, plaques and records have been launched aboard spacecraft. The Pioneer and Voyager probes carry golden discs engraved with human greetings, maps of our solar location, and samples of our music and images. Tiny emissaries now drift outward beyond the solar system, carrying humanity's voice across the void. Perhaps millions of years hence, another intelligence will find them, though by then our species may have changed unrecognizably or vanished. Despite the romance of SETI, decades of listening have yielded no confirmed signal. Critics speak of the great silence, the eerie absence of noise in a universe that should hum with civilizations. But perhaps our expectations are misguided. Perhaps civilizations do not choose radio. Our radio window may span only a moment, a century, or two out of thousands of years, before we compress all data into fiber optics, lasers, or directed bursts too fleeting and focused to spill into interstellar space. Expecting aliens to broadcast on FM radio may be like expecting them to drum on logs. If our own civilization's signals would become undetectable across space in another century, missing others may be inevitable. We may be deaf because we listen in the wrong way. Others argue that distance itself is still a tyrant. Even if signals exist, their faintness would make discovery nearly impossible with current technology. A whisper of a civilization 10,000 light-years away may be indistinguishable from static. Not absence, but technological limit, masks them. As sensitivity grows, perhaps clarity will too. If so, silence may be replaced one day with chorus. Yet the paradox returns. Even if signals are elusive, why no evidence of visitations? Aliens may prefer not to reveal themselves, or may regard us as irrelevant. Or, darkest of all, perhaps civilizations self-destruct long before expansion. The Great Filter Theory suggests at least one near-impossible step in the sequence from planet to galactic civilization. Either we are already past it, uniquely lucky survivors among endless sterile wastelands, or it lies in our future, waiting to end us as it ends all others. Both scenarios are haunting. In the first, we are precious but isolated. In the second, we are doomed. The search for extraterrestrial life thus becomes more than curiosity, it becomes mirror, forcing us to see our fragility back at ourselves. Philosophically, the search defines us. To listen across light years for whispers is to declare we cannot be satisfied with isolation. Religion once told us gods descended, myth once spoke of visitors. Science now demands we answer objectively. But the root emotional impulse remains the same. We want to know that mind is not alone in the cosmos. Each radio telescope dish staring upward is a monument as spiritual as any cathedral, recording in steel and wire our collective yearning for connection. Interestingly, some scientists now join myth in suggesting that if contact comes, it will reshape humanity more profoundly than any discovery before. To learn we are not alone would be to reposition every religion, to rewrite every philosophy. We would cease to be the center of life and instead become one note in a greater cosmic choir. The Copernican principle that Earth is not the center of the solar system would extend to life itself. Intelligence is not unique to humans or Earth, but woven across stars. Our place would be both diminished and elevated, diminished in uniqueness but elevated in participation. If civilizations exist, the next question becomes, what are they like? Are they benevolent teachers, gardeners across the universe? Are they indifferent, pursuing their own ends without care for us? Are they malicious, predators in a Darwinian galactic ecology? The scientific drive cannot answer motive, only existence, but speculation fills the void. Some, surveying the silence, conclude civilizations are careful, quiet because they fear predators. This dark forest hypothesis, borrowed from fiction, suggests the universe is not empty but tense. Every civilization lurks, armed and cautious, terrified of attracting the wrong attention. Silence is survival. If so, our own attempts to broadcast may be reckless, like striking drums in a jungle. Others dismiss this as paranoia, insisting that advanced civilizations would long ago have matured beyond predation, else they would not survive long enough to reach the stars. Our fear, they argue, is simply projection of our own immaturity. Regardless of motive, the scientific search continues with expanding sophistication. Breakthrough Listen, a billion-dollar project funded by private initiative, now surveys the skies with unprecedented breadth, scanning millions of stars across billions of channels. Machine learning filters noise from genuine anomalies. Optical SETI seeks laser flashes, moments of artificial light across interstellar gulfs. Infrared searches sweep galaxies for excess heat emissions that might betray civilizations harnessing entire stars. The frontier is vast, the techniques ever more refined. Each null result narrows probability, each anomaly sets imaginations aflame. We do not yet know whether we are narrowing in on silence or on an answer. In contemplating science's search, however, we must also acknowledge the continuity with humanity's older traditions. When astronomers tilt dishes skyward, they too are priests in a sense, interpreting signals, translating the incomprehensible into story. Their data may be electronic instead of mythic, but it still speaks to our primal desire for contact. The radio telescopes are modern pyramids, the data logs are modern tablets inscribed with questions of gods. Whether they eventually record a signal or not, the act itself unites us with our ancestors gazing at stars. Perhaps one day, a narrow signal will emerge, unambiguous, repeating, mathematical proof undeniable. Perhaps it will be discovered not by a global institution but by a lone researcher scanning archives late at night, suddenly recognizing that one annotation among billions is different. When that occurs, humanity will split into before and after. All questions of myth, gods, and our place in the cosmos will realign. Until then, the silence is haunting. Yet silence itself is a teacher. It forces us to consider that intelligence may be rare, that life itself is fragile, that we may be guardians of a gift the universe rarely produces. The scientific investigation of extraterrestrial civilizations may appear sterile compared to the colorful myths of gods or the sensational reports of UFO contact. But in its patient rigor, it represents humanity's deepest hope given concrete form. It translates longing into mathematics, prayer into engineering, or into observation. It holds up the night sky not as a wall but as a question, seeking through stubborn patience the faintest whisper of company. And though the results so far may be quiet, every new telescope, every new spectrum, every new survey expands the chance. If the cosmos has indeed birthed more minds than ours, one day the silence will crack, and then all of history from Sumerian myths to SETI scans will appear as preludes to the most profound discovery a species can make, that in the immensity of stars, we are not alone. If myths gave us the gods of the stars, if archaeology gave us the ruins of impossible stones, if DNA gave us whispers of biological tampering, and if modern telescopes and radars gave us the silence of a cosmos still undecided, then philosophy and society present us with the most intimate battlefield of the extraterrestrial question. For it is here, in the human heart and mind, that the consequences of believing or disbelieving in other civilizations are most profound. Whether aliens exist has yet to be confirmed, but merely asking the question bends identities, frightens hierarchies, challenges faiths, and tempts imagination. Even absent contact, the hypothesis of extraterrestrial influence is already one of the most powerful forces to ripple through human thought. We cannot address the possibility without simultaneously reshaping our sense of self, our world, our destiny. Imagine for a moment the sudden announcement that indisputable proof has been found, a signal or a ship, undeniable evidence of another civilization. The impact would reverberate through every fabric of society. Religions, many of which root human uniqueness in divine creation, would confront questions about whether God created only us or whether divinity extends across galaxies. For some, this revelation would strengthen faith, seeing alien minds as simply more creation of the same God. For others, it might shatter the centrality of human beings as chosen species, dissolving doctrines into confusion. Social scientists often speak of ontological shock, the disorientation that would accompany such unparalleled confirmation. Our categories of identity, who we are, where we belong, rest fundamentally upon comparison. We have always been the only known intelligence. To suddenly realize we are not would shake every layer of our psychological architecture. Even short of proof, speculation exerts pressure. The idea that we might have been influenced by extraterrestrials genetically, culturally, or architecturally already undermines simple notions of progress. It denies us the luxury of believing human civilization rose solely through its own efforts. For some, that is an intolerable insult to human pride. For others, it is humbling, an invitation to imagine ourselves as younger siblings of a cosmic family. Both responses alter identity. We oscillate between arrogance and humility, between fear of irrelevance and joy at participation in greater networks of intelligence. The implications extend into politics. If an alien civilization has visited or even observed, the question of governance and secrecy inevitably arises. Who should hold the knowledge? Governments for decades have classified and controlled data connected to UFO reports, citing national security. Yet secrecy fuels paranoia, creating conspiratorial cultures where suspicion of authority deepens. If undeniable knowledge exists and is withheld, the gulf between citizens and governments widens into mistrust that could destabilize institutions. On the other hand, sudden release of knowledge may destabilize too, causing panic, religious upheaval, or geopolitical scrambling as nations compete for alliance or protection from hypothetical others. Thus, the alien hypothesis stresses not only belief systems but political systems, raising questions about transparency, control, and the ability of human societies to absorb truths without fracture. There are psychological implications as well. On an individual level, encountering the idea of others greater than ourselves often provokes what philosophers call the sublime, an experience of awe mingled with dread. To look up into the night and imagine elder civilizations incalculably older and wiser than us is to feel the smallness of our species. This smallness can depress, suggesting we are insignificant insects on a cosmic plane. But it can also inspire, reminding us that we are part of something grander than ourselves, a tapestry of intelligence woven across billions of suns. The alien hypothesis stretches imagination to its edge, forcing us beyond anthropocentrism into cosmocentrism, a new humility that may be the necessary foundation for survival in an era of global tension and existential risk. Philosophy specifically grapples with the moral implications. If other civilizations exist, moral frameworks rooted only in Earth appear provincial. How do we judge ourselves knowing others thrive in ways beyond our comprehension? And if we suspect that our origins were influenced by them, that myths of gods encode interventions that helped produce modern humanity, then ethics becomes even more complex. Do we owe gratitude to our makers, if they exist? Do we resist them if they return, claiming authority over us? What obligations do we imagine toward species that seeded us? And conversely, if we are alone, the only spark of consciousness in endless gulfs, then our moral duty magnifies infinitely. We become guardians of the only known light, an irreplaceable testimony to the universe's capacity for thought. Thus, whether others exist or do not exist, our responsibility intensifies, shaping planetary ethics for better or worse. Cultural implications unfold with equal profundity. For centuries, art, literature, and film have already acted as laboratories for extraterrestrial speculation. From science fiction novels to Hollywood blockbusters, humanity has rehearsed countless scenarios of contact war, invasion, symbiosis, mentorship, abandonment, apotheosis. These stories reveal our hopes and our fears, alien others as destroyers, saviors, or mirrors of ourselves. Each scenario shapes public readiness. If proof arrived tomorrow, responses would be filtered through these cultural rehearsals. The alien as enemy would provoke military defense, the alien as sage would evoke spiritual openness. By weaving extraterrestrials into culture long before their appearance, we prepare ourselves subconsciously for the shock. This is why even absence of proof matters. Merely exploring the hypothesis generates culture already adaptive to discovery. There is also the question of existential meaning. For many, one of the terrors of modernity is the possibility that life is ultimately meaningless, adrift in an indifferent cosmos. But if others exist, advanced civilizations scattered across galaxies, then the universe itself acquires a new texture. It is no longer indifferent because we are no longer alone. Intelligence exists, multiplies, participates. Even if distant civilizations never contact us, the knowledge that they thrive can offer solace. We are part of a broader cosmic story, not an accident but participants in a universe alive with mind. For some, this provides religious meaning stronger than any inherited creed. For others, it deepens despair by highlighting our isolation from them. So the alien hypothesis is never neutral. It amplifies either hope or dread, changing existential orientation itself. A further implication rests in technology and desire. If other civilizations exist, our urge to expand, to explore, to push beyond our cradle planet intensifies. The race to space becomes not only about resources or pride but about communion. Every rocket becomes pilgrimage, every telescope a plea for companionship. The awareness or even the possibility of intelligent others acts as accelerant for our technologies, urging us to leap faster, to reach further, because perhaps beyond the next star will be conversation. Thus, the idea of aliens does not merely affect imagination, it reshapes industry itself, fueling experiments, guiding research trajectories, inspiring careers in astronomy, robotics, biotechnology, propulsion. The future is rushed in because the question demands it. Of course, there are political risks attached to discovery. If confirmation arrives in ambiguous form, signals decoded by some but not others, relics uncovered yet claimed by specific powers, it may fragment civilization further. Nations could compete for ownership of contact, weaponizing or monopolizing the revelation. The Cold War glimpses this paradox. Both United States and Soviet Union pursued UFO secrecy not for curiosity but fear of adversary advantage. The alien hypothesis thus challenges our ability to act in planetary unity. For if others exist, they will not recognize us as fragmented, they will see one species. But we may not yet be able to see ourselves that way. The very notion of aliens forces us toward unity, because only as one can we engage another. Thus, the hypothesis becomes a philosophical test of our maturity. Can humanity transcend tribal divisions, or will we splinter further under cosmic pressure? Psychologically, the alien question plays between fear and longing. Fear that superior intelligences will regard us with the same indifference we once regarded lesser animals, turning humanity into laboratory specimens, pets, or pests. Longing that they will be benevolent guides, older siblings reaching to lift us toward new trajectories of prosperity and wisdom. Projection is inevitable. We can only imagine them in our own terms, painted with our anxieties and ideals. Yet even these projections reorient us, reminding us always that there are scales of intelligence beyond our own, whether real or imaginary, and forcing humility in our pride of dominance over Earth. Our very understanding of what human means is stretched. Human may be only local denomination of mind, intelligent life may have countless expressions, ours just one variant. The implications extend across education, science, and philosophy. Universities craft courses in astrobiology, exopolitics, science fiction, preparing future generations to think beyond Earth. This is not indulgence but pragmatic foresight. If contact should come, it will rewire disciplines from economics to theology to biology. Even economics imagines impact, trade with extraterrestrials, competition with their technologies, the obsolescence of human industries against their inventions. Even psychology wonders how human minds adapt when hierarchy collapses and we cease to be apex. The alien hypothesis is thus not merely entertainment, it is a rehearsal for the greatest epistemic shift conceivable. The silence, known as the Great Silence, is itself consequential. It weighs on imagination like a cosmic absence of voice. It forces us into polar positions, either we are impossibly rare and thus immeasurably precious, or we are surveilled and not permitted to know. Both positions influence culture differently. If alone, then we hold unique responsibility, guardians of the only light. If under observation, then our myths of God's watching, our conscience of being measured, receive chilling confirmation. Both scenarios intensify human meaning, pulling us from complacency. That is the paradox. Whether others exist or do not, the implication is immense. Our identity cannot remain the same once the question is seriously asked. In literature and philosophy, thinkers have long toyed with these implications. Pascal wrote of the eternal silence of infinite spaces that terrified him. For others, that silence demanded comfort, leading them to trust in divine shepherds. For modern secular minds, extraterrestrials may fulfill the same role, proof that silence is not empty. Nietzsche declared God dead, leaving humanity to sculpt meaning in solitude. But if intelligence fills the stars, then the universe is less dead, more community awaiting discovery. Meaning is thus redistributed. Contact with extraterrestrials may fulfill, replace, or complicate the functions once held by gods. The psychological readiness for such contact becomes itself a field of study. Scholars debate the disclosure scenario. If governments announce the existence of extraterrestrials confirmed beyond doubt, how would humanity react? Would stock markets crash, religions fracture, or wars erupt over control of contact? Or would a shared realization unify us, dissolving boundaries in light of cosmic kinship? No simulations can predict reliably. But already, exploring the hypothesis gently accustoms us. The very act of thinking about aliens trains the species to consider itself not only as nations, but as Earth. Perhaps this, above any monuments or signals, is the true gift of the hypothesis, rehearsing identity as planetary. Whether aliens exist may not be known for decades, but the implications are already transforming us. Every telescope hunting exoplanets, every radar scan for UFOs, every novel about extraterrestrials, every myth of gods descending all push humanity into an identity beyond self. Alien civilizations may already have shaped us indirectly by provoking us to transcend parochialism, to imagine ourselves as participants in the cosmos. Belief may or may not become proof, but belief alone remakes our philosophy. To conclude a story as vast as the question of extraterrestrial civilizations is perhaps impossible, for the question itself resists closure. It stretches outward in every direction: myth, archaeology, biology, technology, imagination, fear, and hope, like the branching arms of galaxies turning forever in space. And yet we must attempt it. Having considered the myths of gods descending, the enigmas of ancient monuments, the possibility of genetic interventions in our very bodies, the strange objects darting across modern radar screens, the subtle inspiration seeded into our culture, and the rigorous searches of astronomy that reveal both countless worlds and impenetrable silences, we arrive at the final confrontation with meaning itself. What could it mean for humanity, past, present, and future, to be entangled with others from beyond? How shall we settle the tension between absence and presence, between skepticism and wonder? If a conclusion is possible, perhaps it lies not in answering whether aliens truly exist or have touched us, but in recognizing the transformation caused by the persistent asking of this question. Consider again the sweep of human history. In the earliest times, our ancestors huddled beneath stars whose brilliance was unpolluted by electric haze. They invented stories of sky beings, deities that ruled storms, shaped rivers, oversaw harvest. They aligned stones with solstices, they carved monuments to mark star risings, they drew figures on cave walls of luminous forms with helmets and wide eyes. They were already speaking with the cosmos, turning silence into symbolism. Then civilizations rose. Sumerians inscribed tales of descending gods who gave laws. Egyptians built pyramids pointing to constellations, sending pharaohs into the heavens. Greeks speculated that innumerable worlds might harbor life. Indian poets described flying chariots and weapons of radiant sun. Everywhere, myths converged on the idea that the heavens were inhabited and somehow had to do with us. Whether these were literal contacts or imagined projections matters less than the fact that humanity could not keep the sky empty. To us, the stars have always been populated. Centuries past, telescopes revealed the solar system, astronomers mapped galaxies, yet the longing only deepened. When radio waves were discovered, we wondered if they carried voices from the stars. When rockets lifted, we imagined them mirrored by rockets elsewhere. When DNA was sequenced, we found it haunting to consider whether its code had been written partly by foreign intelligences. And when radar paints unknown shapes in the skies of fighter pilots, we repeat once more the same ancient suspicion: we are not alone. From caves to satellites, from prophets to scientists, the question remains unbroken. If extraterrestrials have never been here, then humanity has still lived in their shadow for tens of thousands of years, imagining them, inventing them, rehearsing them, needing them. They are not absent from human history even if their bodies never set foot upon Earth. They are present in our minds, in our imaginations, which is sometimes the most influential presence of all. The persistence of the question itself is the greatest evidence of influence. A myth told for a generation may fade, but a notion repeated for millennia across unconnected continents suggests something archetypal, something deeply engraved. Perhaps it comes from memory of actual presence, civilizations once visiting our pale planet to spark the first fires of culture. Perhaps it comes from instinct, a neural inevitability in any intelligent species to seek mirrors beyond itself. Either way, its power is the same. The alien is not simply another, it is the ultimate other, stretching imagination to cosmic scale, preventing us from retreating into provincial complacency. If aliens do not exist, we have still lived more richly because we dreamed them. If they do exist, then humanity has been rehearsing its first conversation with them since dawn. In either case, the hypothesis has already transformed us, making us cosmic, stretching our horizon from local to infinite. Philosophically, the presence of the alien question serves as humanity's mirror. It reveals both our arrogance and our humility. It shows us how quickly we assume we are unique and chosen, yet also how quickly we long to surrender uniqueness for belonging in a greater community of intelligences. Religions called them gods, prophets called them angels, philosophers called them other worlds, science calls them extraterrestrials. The changing vocabulary cannot conceal the continuity of longing. Whether we seek comfort, inspiration, guidance, or companionship, we cast it upward, outward, to the unreachable. The alien is not only hypothesis of external beings but expression of internal humanity. Our need to believe meaning is larger than us. Yet we cannot dismiss the strange persistence of evidence. Archaeologists uncover ruins that still puzzle, engineers marvel at stones too heavy, geneticists find anomalies mysterious, pilots chase objects physics should forbid. These fragments, scattered like shards, never cohere into proof but never vanish either. They prick the skin of certainty, refusing the easy dismissal that we are wholly alone. Skeptics may explain individually, but the chorus remains: too many puzzles, too many myths, too many testimonies echo across time. Could all be coincidence? Of course. But could all be memory struggling to articulate what cannot be described? Perhaps. Between coincidence and contact lies the landscape of mystery in which we dwell. From the perspective of science, silence weighs heavily. The Fermi paradox presses like an unanswered knock. If the universe is old and vast, why does no one speak? Every star system found with planets, every exoplanet mapped in habitable zones, increases the paradox. The Milky Way should overflow with civilizations, yet our records remain mute. Perhaps the silence itself is the message: either life is fragile and unique, or intelligence is cautious and concealed, or great filters of self-destruction await every species, ours included. Whichever answer emerges, it reshapes our self-conception. We are either impossibly precious or doomed to repeat universal tragedy. In every possible answer, humanity is transformed. So what does it mean if extraterrestrials have truly influenced us? It means our religions are not only theology but history, encoded memories of visitors misnamed as gods. It means our greatest inventions were not solitary sparks but dialogues, transmissions across consciousness from minds we cannot yet see. It means that our civilization is not purely ours, but co-authored. It means we are children, seeded and shepherded, not accidents. For some this is a relief, for others an insult, yet for all it is a change too vast to absorb without tremor. Identity itself would fracture and be remade. To be human would become to be hybrid, participant in a galactic story long hidden. And what if they have never influenced us, if aliens never came and never will? Then we are truly alone, marooned minds in a cosmic ocean. But then the implication magnifies the sacredness of ourselves. We would be the only known consciousness in all the universe, blazing in darkness. Our identity then is not as pupil but as pioneer, the only voice of awareness. Responsibility rises unbearably. We must endure, we must spread, we must preserve meaning because no one else will. Where absence rules, duty expands. Recognizing ourselves as the sole intelligence is a burden heavier than any pyramid block. The survival of consciousness depends wholly on us. One sees then that whether aliens exist or not, whether they influenced us or not, the philosophical demand is identical. Humanity must grasp that it inhabits a cosmic stage, not a local village. The horizon is wider than any one civilization, any one religion, any one planet. To think of aliens is to think cosmically, to imagine ourselves as part of scales that dwarf primal instincts. In this sense, the alien question is less about them than about us. It teaches us humility if they exist, responsibility if they do not. It denies us neutrality. It will not permit us to be complacent animals. It demands that we see ourselves as participants in a drama infinite in stage, whether as one among many or as lonely custodian of mind. Politically and socially, confirmation would be the greatest upheaval since the birth of agriculture. Borders would seem irrelevant beside cosmic kinship. Military postures might collapse or intensify, depending on whether fear or hope prevails. Religions would either scramble or renew. Science would explode with new comparisons, philosophy would find new definitions. But in the long arc, humanity might unify, finally compelled to act as a species, because no alien mind will measure us in national fragments. They will see Earth, one home, one species. If anything could dissolve tribalism, perhaps it is the recognition that our tribe is planetary. Thus, the ultimate consequence of extraterrestrial contact may not be about them but about us, about forcing us to grow into unity. So the conclusion returns not to stars but to ourselves. Whether aliens once descended or not, whether they manipulate chromosomes or plant ideas in minds or fly beside our jets, the truth is that we have already been shaped by the hypothesis. The question itself is intervention. It has lifted our eyes from soil to sky, from hunger to heavens, from survival to speculation. It has compelled our ancestors to build pyramids aligned to constellations, compelled monks to write star maps, compelled scientists to construct telescopes, compelled engineers to fire rockets. It has given us religion, art, stories, science, inspiration, fear, and hope. The extraterrestrial hypothesis is the engine of our greatest achievements, whether or not others exist. We may have invented aliens to invent ourselves. But imagination has a peculiar habit, sometimes what we dream turns out true. Once we dreamed of flight, and planes appeared. Once we dreamed of mechanical brains, and computers emerged. Perhaps our dreaming of aliens is neither delusion nor metaphor but memory or prophecy. Perhaps the question persists because its answer already exists, waiting. One day, a radio telescope may capture a signal undeniable. One day, a craft may uncloak from our skies. One day, genomic analysis may reveal sequences undeniably artificial. When that day comes, historians will trace the human story across millennia and see that we were never unprepared. We rehearsed for it in myth, in mystery, in speculation from the beginning. We wrote the alien into ourselves long before we confirmed it outside ourselves. Therefore, the final paradox of this inquiry is that in seeking them, we discover ourselves. In building hypotheses about extraterrestrial civilizations, we refine what civilization means. In dreaming of their intelligence, we measure our own. If the universe is crowded with minds, we will join them. If it is silent, we will carry meaning alone. Both outcomes define us with equal majesty and equal demand. To conclude, then, is not to answer the question of whether aliens have influenced humanity. It is to acknowledge the influence of the question itself. Extraterrestrials may or may not exist, but the hypothesis of them has already altered everything: our architecture, our myths, our science, our ethics, our politics, our psychology. They exist, undeniably, in the reflections we cast upon the heavens, in the determination with which we point dishes into space, in the songs and stories with which we fill silence. If nothing more, aliens exist in the shape of what they have made us imagine. And yet, silence is not necessarily denial. The stars remain, billions upon billions, blazing, waiting. It is perhaps only a matter of time before hypothesis becomes history. Until then, humanity lives and grows under the oldest, most fertile influence it has ever known, the possibility that we are not alone.